Get on up and dance with the rising pine. Scrub the wife for the moth if she's near. If you have to stop, there's a bar to prop. Have a pint and fill yourself a beer. Get on up and dance with the rising pines. With a jig or a reel, can you hear me? Are you listening? If you want a song, then you can't go wrong. Have a pint and fill yourself a beer.
Hi, I'm Mark Renberg, an Irish musician based here in New England. I've been performing in clubs, pubs, and restaurants for the last quarter century. I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is just outside Washington, D.C. It's suburbia. It's now become a giant suburban complex all the way from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. But I enjoyed, suburban childhood, pretty typical. I started playing guitar when I was 17, I think. When I was growing up, we had always, talked about our family tree, and in particular, just how we had this one Irish ancestor. So I wouldn't say we were very Irish, but there was definitely an Irish streak. It made its way through our DNA and our culture. Out on their beats. Springs a girl. I turn around. She shone like the sea, and she sang that sweet song of the storm.
I had this love of singing that came from growing up with music all around, with singing all around in the church and in the family. We'd sing in school sometimes, but it was really with my family on the, the long road trips, and you'd sing the Rattling Bog or a lot of these old songs, and it'd go on. And it was a way to get the kids to behave in the car, because there were 5 of us. We'd go on these long journeys up to Donegal or over to Sligo. And that was a lot of fun. I had a great uncle, and he had red hair, so we used to joke about how Irish he was. But the one thing from my childhood that really stood out that was very Irish was my uncle. His name was Richard Eugene Bolt, and he went by Dick Bolt as his professional name. He was a musician. He lived in Rochester, New York for most of his life. And he became a pretty renowned Irish musician in the Rochester music scene. And when I was young, younger than a teenager even, he was playing in bands and sharing his Irish music and his bands with us. And I just thought it was the most curious and interesting kind of music at that time, but didn't really think too much deeper beyond that, and was curious and intrigued by what my uncle was doing.
Hello, my name is William Matheny, and we are in front of my house.
I'm from a small town on Puget Sound in Washington State. And for the past 22 years, I've been living in a house in the southeast part of the city of Nagoya in central Japan. My mother bought an electric guitar and a little amplifier for me when I was 12. It was Christmas. Very early on, I found it was tough because the steel strings were rough on your fingers if you didn't have calluses. I don't know, the first band, like rock format band, was maybe in my 3rd year of junior high school. We played several times at what they called a teen center. It was a place for adolescents to go on Friday or Saturday night and dance around to a live band.
I knew a few chords, but then I was about 16 and I was studying French, and as an excuse for studying French, myself and a couple of mates went off to France for a month in the summer. We're traveling around. First we were camping, and then we stayed in hostels, and hostels were a lot more fun because you meet all these cool people. I was in this hostel, and I met this German guy called Wolfgang, I think. And Wolfgang had a guitar, and he showed me a couple of chords. And then I the next day I went out and I bought the complete Beatles. It was on sale for 10 francs or whatever it was at the time. And I started like trying to hammer out a few songs in the hostel later. And then a few people came along and started listening, and I said, oh, play us this one, play us this one. And I couldn't really play anything, but they didn't care. And so they were just interested in listening, and soon there were like a bunch of people, including these pretty girls hanging around, these pretty American girls. And I thought, this is kind of cool. And I didn't even know the chords, so kind of banging on the back of the guitar and singing. But it was a lot of fun.
I went away to college, not too far away, to the local university, University of Maryland in College Park, and struggled for the first 2 years to find my way academically, like a lot of students do. But I did bring my guitar with me, and I always had that. That was like my best friend in a way. After about 2 years, I was really trying to find out what I wanted to do for a major. What's my exit strategy for actually graduating college with a degree, because it wasn't looking great. And I had learned about the business school and about this major called transportation, which sounded really interesting. It was a way to study business without having to necessarily take a huge amount of finance or accounting, which were daunting.
When I was in university, I was playing more with friends, and I lived in an apartment in just behind the Burlington Hotel. It was a nice apartment, and we had nice neighbours who were a bit pissed off because we played too much music, and we played music like late at night. Students, drinking, playing music. It's just acoustic, but we'd be singing it all the time. So I started just going out to Grafton Street and playing, because nobody got bothered then. And I realised you could actually make a few quid. You put out a guitar case, you make a few quid. You didn't even have to know the songs very well.
And then I wanted an acoustic guitar, which took me a while to figure out the money, the necessary money to buy one, but I did. That was like, say, in 1969. I turned 18 in 1970 and turned 23 in 1975. So those were kind of my formative early 20s. James Taylor was a terrific guitar teacher. I learned to play pretty much the way he was playing and what he was doing, how he was finger picking, and that was fun for me, because then I played for friends that I knew, and they were like, oh, that was pretty good.
When I had met Brian Cullen in Japan, and he was playing his original music mostly, but then he started to play some Irish songs and played them as an Irishman who had learned them growing up. So the way that he played them and the way that he interpreted them, and I think that was probably when it really clicked, and I said, wow, this is really interesting music. And he had a very relaxed demeanor about it, because he'd grown up with Irish music. It was really, truly part of his culture, and it was both authentic and irreverent at the same time.
They found I was only a crying for more. Then stick to the crater, the best thing in nature, for sinking your sorrows and raising your joys. Oh Lord, how I chuckle if babes in her truckle could only be suckle and putching me boys.
And then you'd make a few quid, go and have a pint, and then you'd come back, make a few more quid. And at the end of the night, it was great, because people were all drunk. It was lovely on the streets of Dublin. And that's where a song like I Miss Dublin came from.
Meet you at the front gate of Trinity, where the pretty bank girls from the AIB will be waiting. Head up to O'Neill's for a pint of stout. Step up at the drinking so we don't run out of hard cash.
And I was still playing in bands. I was playing in like a cover rock band. I was playing music with my brother. We were dabbling with some original songs and playing some classic rock.
Well, when me and the boys get together, play a little rock and roll. We take a little bit of metal and inject it with some soul. We never know just how
So I decided one way to really be successful with my business degree was to join this club, which really was a fraternity. It was a business fraternity. It wasn't a social fraternity. It had a social aspect to it. And I thought if I joined that and I would have like a study group, people to help each other out with the coursework. So I pledged that fraternity, I was accepted, and that really helped me succeed for the next 2 years and to be able to actually graduate on time with a little bit of extra summer school here and there to push me along the way. Now, upon joining, an unexpected thing happened. One of my fellow pledges in the class for the fraternity was a musician too, was a guitar player too. And we just started talking about music and our love of music and decided that we should form a band. So we put together a band and started playing some of my original songs. We immediately started writing songs together. His name is Luis Gutierrez, but his nickname is Wheeze. So Wheeze and I put together this band. We fumbled around with some names for the band that were awful, like Z-Axis, I think, was one of the band names, and my brother came up with one called Velcro Chestwig. But eventually we settled on the name of the band as The Hooks, because our songs were really catchy. We were unabashedly writing catchy pop songs. As it turned out, at a time when grunge was suddenly hitting the scene, the Hooks started playing lots of local gigs around, with me on guitar and lead vocals, Wheeze mostly on bass, and trying to sing along whenever he could. And then we went through a cast of drummers, almost like the movie Spinal Tap. My brother was the original drummer, then we had another drummer, and eventually we had a third drummer named Steven, who was much younger than us, and we called him the Angry Young Man because he actually wanted to play grunge. So we were playing these power pop songs, and he was playing the drums like it was grunge, and it wasn't quite working. Wheeze and I graduated college, we got our first jobs, and things kind of fizzled out with the band.
In the mid-1980s, the Japanese economy was very strong. Both of the daily newspapers in Seattle started, maybe it was only one of them, I think it was both, started a special section in the business section of the newspaper that was devoted to the economies of the Pacific Rim. And that at that time that was a new concept, and people never talked about something about the economies of the Pacific Rim. A sister of a friend that I wrote to, who was living in Kyushu, when in one of the letters that she sent to me, she included a business card of another person who was working for a company that was headquartered in Tokyo, and I contacted that company and told them I was interested in employment, and they sent me a package of material and essentially a job application, and I filled it out and sent it back, and they wrote me back and said, yeah, we'd like you to come over.
When I graduated from college in 1991, I was an engineer, and unemployment was up at 16%. It was not a good time to graduate as a civil engineer in Ireland. And so I went to this government scheme called FOSS, and they were sending people to Germany and different countries, and I wanted to go to Germany because I'd been in Germany the previous summer and I had so much fun. Great beer, and they loved Irish music, and it was a really fun place. But then they offered me an interview with a Japanese company. So I did the interview with the Japanese company, and this guy, he asked me, we're talking for a while, and then he asked me, do you know this Irish guitarist? I really like him. And he says his name is Lala Gallagher. And I didn't know what on earth he was saying, but I took a guess, and I said, do you mean Rory Gallagher? And that's how I got my job, and that's how I ended up in Japan.
Another one of my fraternity brothers, after he graduated, got the chance to move out to Japan and become a language school manager. So about the time I was working kind of a quasi-dead-end job at a music store, and he immediately reached out to his fraternity brothers and said, hey, I need language teachers. I need English teachers at my school, and is anybody interested? And so I thought about it for maybe about 2 seconds, and I was like, you know what? This would be making double the money I make now for working half as many hours, and I might have all this free time to spend more time working on my music or working on music. So I didn't have to think real hard, and late fall of 1993 is when I decided to move to Japan.
So I headed off to Japan. I had I brought a Fender electric guitar. I just kind of started playing electric guitar. I couldn't really play very well. And then I arrived over in Japan, got my first paycheck. I was working as a civil engineer there in a company. I got my first paycheck. For the first paycheck, I bought a CD player. CD players were really cool back then. And a bunch of Beatles CDs. Beatles were pretty old even at that point, but I loved them. And then I bought a Takamine guitar. That was all my first paycheck. My boss was all worried. He didn't think I'd have enough money to make the next paycheck.
First week of January 1994, I flew out to Japan, really my first international flight, my first time out of the country. And that's how my time in Japan started, and eventually what led to the formation of the Rising Pints. What did my family think when I decided to go to Japan? My sister, a couple years earlier, had moved to Spain. So they kind of accepted that, well, one of their children had gone off to Europe and another was going off to Asia, and they were having a unique experience. So it wasn't, they were mostly happy for me, I think. But of course, they were sad because I wasn't going to be around as much. I was going to try it out for a year and see how it went. And if it didn't go well, then no harm. It was just a year of my life. But I think almost immediately, like within 6 months, I realized I wanted to stay longer.
So the first few months in Japan, I was living with this guy, Conrad, from Northern Ireland. Two of us were working together. And we couldn't even find a pub. We spent the first few months looking around for a pub in Japan. I remember one Friday night we decided we were going to go to a pub. We saw this sign where it said pub outside. We went in there, but it turned out it wasn't a pub. It was some strange Japanese cabaret. And we went in and we got thrown out really quickly. They said, no students, no students. We were trying to say in a really, really bad Japanese, we're not students, we're engineers. But we got thrown out anyway. And then after a few months I met Charles Kelly, and Charles is great. He introduced me to Country Joe and to a few other places. And I started playing there every week. I was playing every Wednesday in Country Joe for a couple of years. They labelled me Brian the Irish Wonder, which I think was a bit sarcastic, actually.
So I spent the next year or so working on what would become my first release, my first album, and to press that to a CD, which was popular at the time. And mid-1995, so after I'd been in Japan about a year and a half, the CD was ready, and I was going to do a CD release party, which was going to be done at actually a place called Big Jerry's, which was like a Mexican restaurant run by Japanese. That was like a burrito place, right? But they had live music, and they had a great stage and a great sound system, so I identified that. And I thought this would be a fantastic place to do the CD release party.
And then I started playing with Tomonori, who's playing fiddle on a lot of Rising Pints tunes. And I still play with Tomonori, not all the time, but on and off. Wonderful, wonderful musician.
So I'm talking to the owner, and I come in one day to talk about planning the CD release party, and there's a guy on stage playing music, playing acoustic guitar and singing, lovely high tenor voice, and I thought it was curious. And then I really thought about my music, which I had done kind of, solo and really done all of the parts myself, and I thought it would, and was going to perform the CD release party with some electronic backing. And I thought, it would be great to hire additional musicians to play with me, and this guy would be perfect.
And then a while after that, I bumped into Mark, and he asked me would I play and help him at his CD release party. And I said, sure. And I said, that's cool, because I've just made an album too.
So that was Brian Cullen performing on stage at Big Jerry's. And so after he took a set break, I hung around and listened to him for like an hour. And when he took a set break, I came up and talked to him and asked him if he'd be willing to consider being hired for the CD release party. And he was really nice, and he thought it sounded really interesting. And he said, I'll do that, and I won't even charge you anything. I'll do it for free.
And so I went along and I played in this CD release party. I played tambourine very well. And I probably played mandolin or something on one of them.
So he played on several of the songs. I think my song Donna and my song Take a Chance.
And then he played with me, and we started playing together, and we put together a band.
We decided that we enjoyed playing together so much that we were going to form a small band, and that we were going to play my original songs, his original songs.
And we put together a band for St. Patrick's Day, and that's the band that eventually became the Rising Pints.
We got this idea that St. Patrick's Day in 1996 would be a great time to maybe put together a larger group and perform at a local restaurant. It just as fate would have it, I was looking for a new job, so I interviewed with William Matheny to be this teacher in a public school. I didn't really like the job or where it was going to be located, so I declined taking the job, but somewhere in the conversation, William and I started talking about music. I invited him to join this group just for the one gig on St. Patrick's Day. And then on the flip side, Brian was already engaged in an Irish music scene in Nagoya, in Japan, that was happening with native Japanese mostly performing Irish music and taking it very seriously. It was more than a hobby for a lot of them. They were fantastic Irish musicians. And he picked out two people that he met and knew, Mayumi Nagaura and Eiji Wakami. And Mayumi is really a virtuoso on the button accordion, as well as the tin whistle. And Eiji played percussion, mostly bongo and conga, but he also played the Irish drum called the balron. So the five of us got together for this haphazard kind of, we threw together, we did some rehearsals, as I recall, and threw together a repertoire, a mix of my songs, original songs, Brian's, a few Irish songs that we had time to learn, some instrumentals, tunes as they call them, and we performed. Now, the venue we performed on St. Patrick's Day 1996 wasn't Irish at all. It was a Southwest American-themed pub called Santa Barbara that was all stucco and pink walls and Southwest American decor, but it was a gig.
Obviously, the building that it was in is gone. It was kind of California Mediterranean style architecture, and it was only 1 floor or 2 floors. It wasn't big, and now it's been replaced with a high-rise, like apartments.
My name is Chris Zaradkowitz, and I've been in Japan 32 years or so, and I originally came to Japan and managed a restaurant called Santa Barbara. It was like the foreign restaurant bar in Nagoya at the time. We started to do live music, mostly rock and roll and Irish, of course, Irish music and Irish bands in Santa Barbara.
We had just come together as a band, and it was St. Patrick's Day. I think we put the band together for that show. And I remember the place was going nuts. But you remember Lou Roberts, who ran Bumfies, the Irish pub?
Yeah.
I think it was the first time I ever met Lou. And Lou became quite important for me later. In the middle of the show, Lou walks up through the audience. It was a crowded place. He walks up with this little green scarf, comes up, and we're singing some songs, and he puts it around my neck. He gives me a kiss on the cheek. And I still remember that so vividly.
Oh, that's awesome.
And somewhere along the line, we came up with the name The Rising Pints. Brian has a story about how he got a postcard.
And then at Christmas, December 1991, I got this Christmas card from a friend, Chris, back in Ireland. And I opened up the card, and it was very funny. It said, "Greetings to the land of the rising sun, from the land of the rising pint." So I thought, what a great line, the rising pint. So a few years later, when we got the band together, I remember that and I thought, this is a great name for a band.
Probably one of the most memorable moments was the first time we played at the restaurant part of a place called The Bottom Line. The one in New York is the most famous one. Nagoya had one. And they had two parts to the club. One was the outside bar restaurant area, and the other was the back room large club venue. Now, we got booked into the restaurant bar area, but which for us was just, fantastic. Initial dream come true. We had rehearsed a lot. We were very polished. We knew exactly what we were playing, and we played it really well, and we did a diversity of songs. But there was such a turnout. The place was completely full. What an enthusiastic response. It was more like they were listening, though. They were all sitting and clapping and really enjoying. It was the first time as a band we really performed like a real gig. We had a lot of memorable moments playing locally. We would play for sometimes for decent pay that we would split up, or sometimes just a free gig in the park or at a venue, a coffee shop or something. We played a lot all around. The next really memorable thing that happened was about a year or a year and a half later, when we finally released our CD, we got booked to perform in the back room in the club there to do our CD release party. And it was kind of a culmination of the band forming, doing its first recording, releasing that recording, and doing this kickoff CD release party.
Whiskey in the Jar というのは、ウイスキーとジャーと全然関係ないですが、素敵な曲ですが、やりたいと思います。昔の泥棒の話。
I was going over the Cotton Carry Mountain. Met them, kept the foreign land, his money he was counting. First produced my pistol, and I then produced my rapier. Said stand and deliver for a beat of all the season. That do-da-da-da. Whack for my daddy-o, whack for my daddy-o. There's whiskey in the jar. Well, I counted up my money and I made a pretty penny. Put it in my pocket and I took it home to Jenny. Well, she sighed and she swore that she never would betray me. Never take a while, but it never came easy. My charade, do-da-da-da. Whack for my daddy-o, whack for my daddy-o. There's whiskey in the jar. Well, I went into my chamber for to take a slumber. I dreamt of golden coins and for sure it was the wonder. Jenny took my charge, filled them up with water, calling Captain Farrell to be ready for the slaughter. My charade, do-da-da-da. Whack for my daddy-o, whack for my daddy-o. There's whiskey in the jar. To save me is my brother in the army. If I can find his station in Cochrane, Killarney, together we'll go roving in the lowlands of Kilkenny. Treat me not so bad, I'm on the darling Jenny. My charade, do-da-da-da. Whack for my daddy-o, whack for my daddy-o. There's whiskey in the jar. I say, whack for my daddy-o, whack for my daddy-o. There's whiskey in the jar.
Thank you very much.
We started touring after that. We started doing gigs in Tokyo and Osaka, Kyoto and Kobe. Probably the most memorable experience that happened was one of the first gigs we did as a 5-piece band in Osaka. We were playing at one of the chain restaurants called the Dubliner, and we were booked to perform there, and I think we were going to get paid, like $800 equivalent or something like that. Maybe just enough to break even with the travel and everything. The response from the audience and the management was so overwhelming, we couldn't finish the gig. We kept playing a song and they kept calling for another encore, and they wouldn't stop clapping and cheering. So we'd play another upbeat song and they'd do the same thing. And I think this went on for like 3 or 4 songs of encores. And it's like, how do we wrap up this gig and get out of here? And one of us had the idea of, okay, let's play a slow song, and that'll calm people down and wind it down. And that's when we learned that trick, is when you're having too successful a gig, all good things have to come to an end. So the way to wind it down is to play a mellow song, a ballad, or a slow tune or something like that. So after that gig, just the crowd was wild. It was insane at the Dublin Osaka. And the manager came up to us and was just beaming with a smile. And he gave us an extra few $100s. I think he gave us like $1,000 instead of, and it was the first time we're getting a tip, more than we actually agreed. So we continued to play there for another year or so, mainly as a duo, just Brian and myself. But I think that was the most memorable gig of the entire time in Japan. And of course, the real melancholy gig, both beautiful and sad, was my last gig on March 22nd, 1998, before I left just a week or so later. So it was the final performance of the 5-piece version of the Rising Pints.
First special night, this is Mark's last night.
last night. So afterwards, everybody buy Mark one drink. So you should have. But if Mark hadn't been here, I mean, we never really could have got to get him. I mean, we did all the practice in his house. We did all the recording in his studio. We drank all the beer in his house, so he's got none left. But so it really is kind of he's still got his bum up in the air. It's a very, very hard thing for us, for Mark. Really. Save your tears. Save your tears.
Come single bellbow, I'm doing you pay attention. Don't ever fall in love, it's the devil's own invention. Once I fell in love, when I made him so bewitching. Miss Henrietta Bell and Captain Kelly's kitchen with my Tora Lorelei, Tora Lorelei, with my Tora Lorelei, Tora Lorelei. At the age of 17, I was apprenticed to the roadster. Not far from Steve's Green, well, Miss Belvedere was closer. Her manners were supreme. She set my heart a twitching.
From start to finish, the Rising Planks, as the five-piece group, really only played for about 2 years. In retrospect, it seems like a lot longer, but we packed a lot of music and a lot of life into those 2 years. And after that, the Rising Pints, morphed into smaller versions, duos or trios. They continued the group without me in Japan with other members, Brian and William sometimes and other members. And then Brian and I continued to work on recordings remotely as I had moved to New England at that point. I realized that if I didn't plan to leave Japan, I might get stuck here because it's a strange thing. Normally in the human psyche, you would think, this is really good. This is a good life. I'm enjoying this. That you would say, I want to stay here and continue on with. But something in my mind said, you know what? It's too easy to live here. And now I'm settled in. If I don't leave now, I could always come back. But if I don't leave now, I might never leave. And I may never have something else out there that I didn't know what it was waiting for me. So I think it was probably when I was a year away from leaving that I said, I need a full year to prepare. So I decided in the spring of '97 that I was going to leave in the spring of '98. I had no idea about this thing called reverse culture shock. And when I moved back in the spring of 1998, I was devastated. I did not really understand my own country anymore. It seemed like it had changed a lot more than a place should change in just a little over 4 years. It's given me a lot of confidence in my life. I guess when I was early on doing music, I didn't have a lot of musical confidence, and it gave me the confidence that I could take music seriously for my own ends, but at the same time really have it be a love of my life that I would enjoy through the rest of my life. And thankfully, it's something you can continue to do through your whole life, kind of like golf, I think, right?
We'll play the wild robin no more, and it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild robin. No, never, no more. I went into an alehouse I used to frequent. I called the landlady, my money was spent. I asked her for credit, she answered me nay. For custom like yours I could have any day. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild robin. No, never, no more. I took up from me pocket 10 sovereigns bright, and the landlady's eyes, they lit up with delight. She said, I've got whiskies and beers of the best, and the words that I spoke, they were only in jest. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild robin. No, never, no more. I'll go home to my parents, confess what I've done. I lost him to part in their prodigal son, and after they caressed me as oft as before, then I never will play the wild robin no more, and it's no. Hey, rise up your voice, no day, never, no more. Will I play the wild robin? No, never, no more. And there's no nay, never. Rise up your voice, no day, never, no more. Will I play the wild robin? No, never. Thank you very much. Good night. Thanks a lot. I'll be back. With my darling Lorna, darling Lorna, with my darling Lorna, darling laddie, when the captain came downstairs and seen my situation, in spite of all my prayers, I was taken to the station.